Welcome back to another edition of our case study podcast videos. I'm with Theo Jansen van Vuuren, who is our Special Operations Manager. Welcome,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
For our case study, it was a request for remittance on a VAT. Will you please give us a quick introduction and context on the client?
100%. So this specific client was a fleet and logistics company, and we did a request for remissions against administration penalties and interest that was levied on their VAT account.
Sure. RFR, remission of penalties and interest. That's a lot of interesting words. So what would you say are the real-world consequences for a business facing VAT penalties and interest that have accumulated over some time?
So obviously with most companies, they're on the invoice basis. So when you issue an invoice to a debtor, the chances of them making payment very quickly is often delayed. So with that, you're obliged to make a VAT payment on that output tax at month end. But if you do not have the necessary cash flows in order to make that payment, obviously as soon as the timeline lapses, a system automatically adds an administration penalty of 10% of whatever the total amount due to SARS was, and interest accrues immediately. Now over time, that interest accumulates, and it can have dramatic effects if it compiles for a couple of years going forward. And obviously a company that's already struggling to make the payment to begin with, the more debt that occurs, the worse the situation gets. With incurred debt, SARS can put non-compliance on your profile. Non-compliance can lead to some payments owed to the company, especially if you're dealing with grants. That can be withheld until your compliance gets achieved. If SARS takes it further by appointing third parties to collect on their behalf, you can have final demand letters sent to you where SARS can start attaching some of the company's assets. And a step further than that most people are not aware of, that is very important as it is currently happening, is the company's directors or shareholders and owners can have personal liability suits in their own capacity lodged against them by SARS to recoup that debt.
Okay, so SARS debt left unchecked is absolutely no joke.
It will get bad, and SARS will come and collect.
Okay, yeah, that's not a good place to be at all. So, just to get a bit of more insight, many businesses assume that penalties and interest, if they paid it, it's something that they've paid already. That you're written off, you can just go forward. But what does the Tax Admin Act actually say about the remittance of the penalties and interest?
Okay, so Section 215 gives the taxpayer an avenue in order to recoup those admin penalties and interest. However, Section 218 has very specific circumstances under which a taxpayer can apply to have those penalties and interest reversed. So it's a case of, it's not a lost cause, it's not money down the drain that you'll never see again, but you need to have valid reasons to supply to SARS, and it needs to be reasons that you can prove. You can't just say, for example, sorry, I forgot to make payment, or my submission was late because my dog was sick, or something like that. So there's stipulations in the Act that if you fall within those categories and you can prove it, then you can apply for that money to be basically refunded to you at a later stage. So if for example, this is something that happened 5 years ago, like for this specific case, the penalties and interest that we objected against was between 2021 and 2024. So, and we did the objection in 2025. So it's not a case of it's lost. You can still recoup it, but there's a process that needs to be undergone in order to do that.
Okay, will you just clarify a bit of those requirements for the RFR?
Okay, so SARS gives us specific requirements. The most obvious one is financial hardship. You can physically not afford to make payment without closing your doors. or if it's in a case of an individual, then they cannot meet their living expenses for the month by paying SARS instead of doing that. So financial hardship is the first one on the agenda. Then SARS also gives provisions, for example, for natural man-made disasters. Obviously, if we look at this time frame, 2021 to 24, that was right after the COVID disaster that hit the country. So, and the ripple effects that went on from there. We also have situations where, for example, if it's civil unrest or distress, say for example, all the taxis in the country decide to go on strike and your workforce cannot physically get to the offices in order to do the work, that could be one. Another one is if SARS made a mistake on their side. So say for example, you actually did make payment on time within legislation and the money only was captured on their system a day late, and the penalties, because it's system generated, the penalty automatically gets kicked in, then that is also an area that you can argue that it was SARS's fault. But with all of this, you need to have documentation and proof to show this. So, and illness, for example, say the person that was responsible for making the payment was sick. Just saying they were sick doesn't qualify.
Yeah.
You need to have a doctor's letter, and it needs to be for the duration where that payment had to be made.
Okay, no, thank you for that insight. So just to recap a bit on this case study, this was a fleet solutions company in the logistics sector. Will you take us through our approach and what the penalties and interest that we're trying to recoup was initially, and how much did we recover?
Okay, 100%. So our first approach is to study the statement of account of the taxpayer. Therein we identify all the different penalties, add up the accumulated interest for the whole period, or all the periods in question, and then we have a base to work with. The current base of this specific case was 2.5 million. That was for the scope of the project. Now, within that, we identified obviously each month where the penalties were, and we analyzed, was it a late submission or just a late payment or non-payment at all? Once we've identified what the trend was with all of these penalties that occurred, then it was a case of we approached it by saying, okay, what caused these penalties? What caused the late payments or the late submissions and stuff like that? And then it's a case of we needed to gather information and support for each period. So if it's a case of we're going to argue financial hardship, that was the case for this specific company, then it's going to be gathering the annual financial statements of all the years in question and all the bank statements to have evidentiary proof to show that it's not money that they just didn't transfer from one account to another. It was a case of this is the historic financial position of the company, and that is why non-payment was made. Okay,
so in essence, MaxProf's approach is to have a client-focused and individually modified approach. Yes. And submission of supporting documents on a case-to-case basis.
Yes, this is not a case of where you can have a generic template and just fill it out and send it to SARS and they're happy with it. This is a compilation of a report and it's a whole document of evidence that goes along with it. And this is purely case by case basis. I can, for example, if in 1 month they didn't have the money to pay because of financial hardship, the next month the person could have been sick. The month after that, it could have been a case of there was civil unrest. So you can't just go and say, for the last 4 years, I didn't have the money to pay.
Okay, so at the end, a lot of companies out there would say then obviously, well, we can do this ourselves. But if we look back at what you've just mentioned, that's a stretch for a company with that specific expertise. With MaxProf, obviously the expertise on dealing with this on a regular basis with a lot of clients. You on your capacity as Special Operations Manager, you gain that experience as to what works and what doesn't work.
Yes, so we have a proven and successful track record when dealing with requests for remissions at MaxProf. And it's a case of, because this is legislative and it requires comprehensive portfolios of evidence, because in SARS's view, the burden of proof is on the taxpayer. You need to lay out exactly, this is the penalty, this is what I'm objecting against, this is the reason for it. SARS can at any point in time query anything regarding your evidence, and you need to be able to back it up with legislative support. So it's a case of, if you're going to approach something like this, it's the same approach in terms of filing an objection against an assessment in retrospect. You need to have the expertise in the specific field in order to be successful in it.
So just to get to the successful part, out of that 2.5 million that was the original scope, how much did MaxProf actually save this fleet solutions company?
So we managed to recover 2.3 million out of the 2.5 million. So it was a high success rate of the specific project. And to put it into perspective, that 2.3 million is approximately 10% of the yearly payroll for this company.
So it obviously would, that injection on the cash flow would assist any company with unpaid bills, unpaid creditors, things like that, to cover those spaces or gaps that you originally thought maybe would have. Well, if I was a business owner, I would think that that money has already been spent and I will never get it back. So 2.3 million out of 2.5 is a great success. So in your words, what message would you share with businesses currently sitting with historic penalties and interest?
So obviously it's a case of, if you have penalties and interest on your account, it means that your business has gone through a bit of a rough patch. So dealing with additional stuff like this, it might feel overwhelming and that you don't even know where to start. But it's not lost. It can be recovered following the right procedures, following the right processes, involving a company like MaxProf that has the expertise in dealing with these things. You can get that money back. And if you are currently in a position of, say for example, you don't have any debt owed to SARS, you already paid all of that outstanding admin penalties and interest and all of those things, it will lie as a credit on your account, or it will physically be paid out as a refund to you. So it's not a case of it's lost and it's gone and we just wash it away. There are ways to get it back, correct ways.
Okay, thank you. I think that brings us to an end to the interview. Thank you very much, Theo. I hope everybody finds this piece interesting and will then contact MaxProf to assist with the specialized request for remission service that we can assist with. Thank you very much.
Thank you.